Welcome, everybody. It's 5:01. We'll get started. I think a few more people will be joining us. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for being here and for agreeing to the change of the date. Having a steering committee meeting on Thanksgiving Eve would not be a good idea. Similarly, next month, we are going to push this. I have this on the agenda. We're going to push this meeting to December 18th. And we can talk about whether we want that in person. Maybe think about that during this meeting. We'll come back to that. Nick, it would have to be in your office, but if you all would like to host, maybe we could do an in-person and a little best wishes for the holidays. But I'll pick that back up. You all can think about it a little bit. We will dive in. I still think I need to pick up the recording from the September meeting from Richard and get that uploaded. And I have one more to upload from last time. I'm recording this one, so I will get that uploaded and then we will be caught up. So again, we don't really have formal minutes in this particular committee at this point. So we'll move on. And tonight is the night of council meeting. So Owen, thank you for being here as you always are. We really appreciate it. So I will ask you to maybe to update us on what's going on in Councilwoman Sawyer's office.
Yeah, totally. Good to see you guys. Three updates for you. The first one is that compost bins are finally coming to District 5 neighborhoods. So that'll be coming in the spring. To do this, Dottie and the mayor decided to move large item pickup to every 9 weeks instead of once a month. And then we'll be moving recycling to every other week instead of weekly. And then that'll start in January. And then the second update is that for sidewalks, that will start coming in January. Also, that'll show up on your wastewater bill. It'll be about $150 for property owners. And then the third, and Lou, I'm sure you're going to bring this up. I know we're talking about it at the next meeting, but the Cherry Creek Design Advisory Board that passed through last week. So applying that to Cherry Creek West. So those are the three updates from Councilwoman Sawyer.
Perfect. I know that I heard from Amy Carroll that she would not be able to be here, but Jenny is here. So Jenny, I don't know if you want to provide any update. I think that there was no controversy about the application. This has been going on a long time, and it was very much a part of the discussion on Cherry Creek West, and in fact, in the community benefit agreement as an obligation of the developer to work the design guidelines applied. So thank you for doing that, Jenny. If you want to give us any update on Cherry Creek West.
Yeah, so we will be doing abatement on the three buildings, on two of the three buildings, the old Elways and the old Boulder Running Company, starting in January. And then the plan is to demolish both those buildings in July next year. So just getting ready for that.
Perfect. Any questions about the application of the design guidelines? The other issue with respect to the DAB is that there are some changes coming as far as the configuration of the DAB. As you all know from our meeting last month, 2 months ago, the board, we are trying to make sure that there is a representative from the steering committee on that board. Mary Morissette, who used to be on the board and actually used to chair that board, who is an architect, has applied. I did confirm this committee's vote to encourage her to be approved. So that is still in process. There are a couple of other changes going through the system. And we did have some comments for the language of the zoning code to reflect the application. And they had removed the word north, which was very confusing, suggesting that perhaps this would apply to all of Cherry Creek. So we are working to get that language so that it will conform to what all of our understanding is, which is that the design guidelines apply to the bid and now to Cherry Creek West, not to even all of the commercial spaces in the Cherry Creek North neighborhood. So that will be a part of our discussion for next month. And Abe Barge will be talking about that. We will be going through what the changes are, talking about the configuration of the board. Nick, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that anymore at this point, or wait till next month.
No, I can weigh in. You know, one of the things that I would want this gathering to know is Richard and I sit through those meetings, and the kind of dialogue that goes on in that meeting is, I would call it nothing less than extraordinary. To listen to, imagine a group of architects who are critiquing the work of essentially one of their colleagues in the industry. And what I've learned is that if you don't have expertise in this discipline, you're not going to be able to add much value. That's very clear. I'm delighted to know that Mary's applied. She's, I think, eminently qualified. But ultimately, the selection process will be done by the existing members of the Design Advisory Board. And so, you know, we'll be looking for real professional, strong reputations, but people who truly understand the discipline of architecture. That's really what's made this group so successful in the past, and I think will going forward.
I did just see one follow-up question about how long the abatement will take, about 4 months. Just wanted to answer that. Thanks.
And that was just a question from Meredith that came through on the chat. I completely agree, Nick. We've been so lucky. If anybody wants to follow those meetings, they are public, and they are fascinating. And I know that for people like Brooks and Alan and Mary, who have followed this for a long time and participated, it is a well-respected group. These are not renegades. These are really top tier people in that industry. So, but it is lovely to watch how they work so hard. And I do not believe these are paid positions. And they volunteer their time to make this area absolutely spectacular. And we all benefit from that. Oh, and there's another fabulous architect. Hello, Bob. So I do think we all benefit from that. I do think it is really helpful to us to have somebody who actually serves on this committee, who can bring to the committee updates from time to time. Usually when there are large projects that are of interest to people within the neighborhood, I try to attend. Linda, Babs, they attend as well from time to time. So we will continue to do that so that we can stay informed about what's coming to the neighborhood, as there are lots of questions about what these projects are going to be and look like. But I think for this committee, it's really important. So we will hear more about that in the process next week or next month, excuse me. Okay, we're going to just move on. There's no one here from Councilman Cashman. And nobody here from the mall. Nick, quick question. Do you know if there has been another named manager for the mall?
There is. I've met the new manager. His name is Mike Wilson. He is eminently qualified. He's been in the business for many, many years. He's thrilled to be in Denver, coming up here from LA. I will reach out to him. I don't think he frankly even knows that the steering committee exists. He certainly didn't have this on his calendar, but I'll be happy to reach out to Mike and let him know what the schedule looks like going forward. But I think you'll be delighted with Mike. I think he's going to make great contributions.
Terrific. And then maybe you could just do a quick email introduction, and then I'm happy to meet him for coffee or whatever and tell him how he can get up to speed, look at some of the prior meetings of the steering committee, and especially with Olga's recent sort of doubling down on the fact that there really are obligations of the steering committee to the mall and vice versa. I think it would be great to get Mike involved, and we've missed having somebody from the mall on this committee and involved. So thank you for that, Nick. So we'll make sure that happens. So is Chris Nicholson on yet? I don't think I
see him
see
yet.
him.
I did send him a notice.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Stuart, that would be great. Stuart is here. Maybe Stuart, you want to talk a little bit. I know that you have met Chris, and I think Bill Tanner has met with Chris as well. Chris was voted in as the RTD district representative. So we would like to get him more involved. And of course, with everything going on right now with transportation, it's going to be really important and top of mind for us. So do you want to say a few words, Stuart, and hopefully he can join, and then we can move on to the discussion about BRT.
Sure. Chris certainly earned this position. He met with just about everybody he could in shaping this. I grilled him literally in a meeting because I expect major change at the board level. I also feel that our board should be half nominated and half elected. All elected just is not acceptable. It's like every 8 years we get some crazy folks on the board and everything goes awry. We can't take that any longer. I also, between all of us, I asked him point blank, if necessary, would you fire the GM? And right now at this point, I don't think that she's doing the job she should be doing. And I told him that. But he has done a lot of research. And the thing that I think was most impressive is that he reached out to 7 other board members and asked them if they're equally committed to some major changes. I think that the biggest thing on his list has been that safety, both the perception of safety and real safety. But the buses haven't been all that safe. As some of you may know, they expanded from I think 5 security to 80 security. So they're improving. But Chris is certainly going to be focused on this. I really talked to him about our issues in Cherry Creek and distinguished how we are not like downtown. We are not a node. We need to be a node. The only downside I'd say with Chris is that he is a downtown resident and he has a full grasp of what's going on downtown. That's a full plate of activity alone, let alone dealing with our issues. But he and I seem to connect quite well, share many ideas, and we'll continue to work to get reliable and frequent transit to Cherry Creek. Because right now, we don't have that at all. It's an embarrassment.
Stuart, do you want to also, since you've joined us and with your wealth of knowledge about this, do you want to talk a little bit about pending legislation that will impact the transit?
Yeah, there's a variety of different bills. One is that they were successful in keeping the Tabor refund amount. So that's going to give additional dollars to RTD, which will be very valuable. But I also think that we need to be looking at other ways to fund transit in the longer term. But we also need to fix our transit agency first. There are other bills that are also going through the guidance document for the new parking rules will be coming out in about 2 weeks. I have the draft currently. And the idea was that they removed parking from any building that was near a transit station or an enhanced transit corridor, which was what really got me involved because you just don't take it away. You've got to find alternatives. So if you have reasonable alternatives, and thankfully, if you do look at the guidance document, I'd be happy to share it with you. We built everything in there all the way down into parking benefit districts, which they called mobility districts. But that's been something that the city's been very resistant on. And so hopefully this will change. The city looks at parking as a revenue source, and that's just about all. So we're trying to get the city to look at more creative ways for managing access to a site and ensuring that there's sufficient parking for people when it's needed. There's nothing more crazy than building a building and taking away the parking and expecting people to ride the bus, and the bus comes by once an hour. And that really is our scenario. So there are quite a few bills going through, all very positive. Obviously, there's going to be changes at the federal level. We'll see what that happens with transit funds. We'll wait and see.
All right, thank you, Stuart. And then I think I just got back. I was out of the country for a week, and during that time, the BRT meeting on Colorado Boulevard took place. I think, Annette, you were going to try to participate in my absence, and I know that there have been some emails today with minutes and so on, but were you able to make that meeting, Annette?
I was.
Thank
I
you.
was able to be there.
And so I think what we'll do is, since this discussion is going to be so important for the Cherry Creek area and for all of the neighborhoods and businesses at the steering committee level, we're going to try to follow this pretty closely. And I know that I am on that stakeholder working group. And thanks, Annette, again for stepping in my absence. But I think right now we have Ryan Knowles, who thankfully could be here, who's actually running this project. And Ryan, I assume you have something to share. I'm going to make you a co-host, so you'll be able to do that. And he is joining us tonight to tell us about the process, what is coming, and what that really means for some of these other issues. Obviously, with the development that's going on and the discussions about limiting parking for new projects that are on a transit corridor, it's a chicken and the egg. Can you take advantage of those parking offsets if the transit has not yet been built? And those are real concerns for a neighborhood that still, for the most part, people that I know who live in this neighborhood have cars. People who work in this neighborhood don't have a lot of options on how to get here. So living closer will be helpful, but you still have to get from point A to point B. So until we have improved transit, we will continue to have these issues. So I am going to turn it over now to Ryan to talk to us about this project.
Thanks, Lou. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. Well, as Lou said, I'm Ryan Knowles. I work with CDOT Region 1, and I manage the Bus Rapid Transit program. So we're a new unit in the Traffic and Safety Division of Region 1, and we are tasked with designing and delivering bus rapid transit projects. So our two primary projects right now are Federal Boulevard, which is a little bit farther along, and Colorado Boulevard. So I have some information to share tonight, kind of a streamlined version of the meeting that we had last week, but we can keep it pretty casual. If you have questions, feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat, and just go from there. So the reason that CDOT is involved with BRT is really coming from our governor's office as well as the state legislature. So in the past several years, interest in transit at the state level has grown, as I'm sure you're all well aware. And CDOT has been mostly focused on statewide transit, so our busing and outrider services, certainly wading into the rail discussion with Fun Range Passenger Rail as well as the non-rail project. But it's well known in the Denver metro region that there are a lot of really strong ridership lines where people rely and depend on transit, and that the service could be better. So on that note, as part of the 10-year plan, CDOT really prioritized arterial bus rapid transit. So transit within our urban areas on our state highways, which are also arterial roads like federal and Colorado. And we allocated, actually our Transportation Commission allocated $170 million to really address these corridors, making sure that transit is a viable and reliable option, one that can compete with driving so that folks have options. So part of our mandate is to really build more options into our network, in addition to driving, and also to address our greenhouse gas emissions issue. So as you're all, I'm sure, very well aware, the air quality is horrible in the summertime and in general, just not really great in the Front Range. And as part of our goal to really improve that situation, our 10-year plan has modeled these projects along with Dr. Cog's 2045 Metro Vision to make sure that we are on track in the horizon years. So that's really kind of where the BRT projects are coming from. Additionally, we recognize that these corridors are some of the most difficult and frankly unsafe corridors for people who are walking and biking and doing things other than driving. And even for drivers, they are not very safe. Also, they have pretty significant crash histories and trends. And so thinking about how we can better organize traffic and improve transit service, improve pedestrian networks is a big part of this. And really, safety is kind of our guiding star at CDOT Region 1, especially in the Traffic and Safety Division. And so we are building a lot of safety benefits and elements into these projects. So I believe many people maybe on this call have been involved in some of the work we've been doing on Colorado Boulevard. We started with a corridor plan earlier in the year, and we really did some work on existing conditions, did a lot of great community engagement, and really laid the foundation for the work that we're doing now with developing a BRT line. And our goal is really to keep the momentum rolling and really move quickly on developing a solution and getting it implemented before the end of the decade, which sounds like a long time, but in transportation years, it's very quick. So our study area is basically between the 40th and Colorado Station, which serves the A line going out to the airport, between Union Station and the airport. That's just south of I-70, and the project will extend basically to Southmore Station. We're really looking at the key infrastructure to be between the 40th and Colorado Station and Yale Avenue, but the actual bus service will extend all the way to Southmore Station. And so that's a determination that we made with our project partners, the City and County of Denver, OTD, and the City of Glendale. We initially thought that we would have this project terminate at the Colorado Station just south of I-25, but it really made sense to build on the route that the number 40 already takes. And so really this is kind of a true upgrade of the number 40 from a local bus to a bus rapid transit. And so as I mentioned, we are very focused on improving the safety conditions on Colorado Boulevard, but also really ensuring that the bus rapid transit is fast and reliable. And so today, the number 40 is one of the more delayed routes in the entire RTD system. It has strong ridership, about 3,000 riders per day. We expect that can grow quite a bit, but we also want to better serve the people who already use the bus and make sure that they can get to where they need to go on time and they can rely on the bus to show up when they go out to get it. So when we talk about bus rapid transit, we are really talking about a service that in a lot of ways pulls the best features of light rail into the bus line. So for example, rather than having a regular bus stop, you have an enhanced station, which has a platform so that when you board the bus, the platform is almost the same height they're just about the same height as the floor of the bus, which makes it a lot easier if you're using a wheelchair or you're rolling a bike on the bus. Ticket vending machines, where you buy your ticket before you get on the bus, similar to what you would do with a train. Real-time information. So this is where the display will tell you when the next bus is arriving, kind of like a train station. And then nicer station architecture. So we'll be looking at really trying to create something a little more distinctive than your normal RTD bus shelter on Colorado Boulevard. We see that as a community benefit. So something that really shows that we care about Colorado Boulevard and that we want people to be on this line and be on the street. And then finally, we'll have components at the intersections called transit signal priority. That's where the bus communicates with the controller and the signals so that when it approaches, the signal will either stay green or it will default to the next green cycle if it's on a red. So that lessens the amount of time that the bus is stuck at red lights, which also improves that speed and reliability I mentioned. And then we are, and I'll go into this in a little more detail, but we are looking at potentially adding bus lanes to Colorado Boulevard as well. So right now we're in what we call the alternatives analysis phase of the project, and I'll get into kind of what that looks like, the process. But basically the purpose of that phase is really to determine what the BRT should look like. So really we are focused on three key forms of BRT, and there's some nuances here and there, but this is really kind of the foundation of what we're doing right now, is figuring out through an analysis if the BRT should be in the middle of the street, similar to the design of the Colfax BRT, if it should be on the sides of the street along the curbs. So that's the design that we're moving forward with for Federal Boulevard, or if it should be in mixed flow. So this is where it would share lanes with traffic on the sides of the street, similar to how it'll operate in the city of Aurora on Colfax. So some of the considerations with these three types, really, it's a matter of trade-offs. So center running is probably the best in terms of bus reliability because it has the fewest conflicts with other cars and other vehicles on the road. But it does typically cost more to implement because it takes more right of way. It also could potentially have larger right of way impacts on that note. Whereas side running is a little bit more less exclusive, I would say. So the bus lanes are still only for buses, except where there are driveways or there are intersections, in which case the bus needs to share the lane with other vehicles. So drivers can turn into the bus lane and go into a driveway of the business, or when they approach an intersection, they merge into the bus lane to take a right on the intersecting street. So there's a little more friction with the other vehicles on the road, but we can manage those. So that's one consideration, I guess, with side running. And then mixed flow BRT basically has those considerations, same as side running, except that vehicles can share the lane as they do today. So the bus would be in a lane with other cars. It would get stuck with traffic when it's congested. So there are implications for how fast we can make the bus move and get through the corridor with that alignment. So as I mentioned, we started with a corridor plan. We had several stakeholder meetings, one at the end of last year and then two earlier this year. We completed that study. I believe it's now on our webpage. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look at the final product of that planning effort, was really high quality, and we've taken a lot of the data that we analyzed and pulled it into this project. And as I mentioned, most importantly, we've really been able to build on our engagement, including the stakeholder committee, so that we didn't start fresh with a new effort for this BRT phase. We are now fully in the BRT part of the project. We're going to be selecting what the alternative looks like. So figuring out what BRT for Colorado should be. And then from there, we will focus on design and hopefully construction by calendar year 2028. We have started our engagement specific to the BRT. So in early September or mid-September, September 13th, we had a open house, which was kind of our introduction of the project to the community. We had very good turnout. We had 168 attendees, which was more than I was expecting, to be honest. But it was a very packed house, especially for the first hour. Got a lot of comments, and we've had a survey online that we actually closed recently, but we had over 600 survey responses in regard to the project. And I have a little bit of information to share what that feedback looked like. So generally speaking, the trips that are taken by public transit on Colorado Boulevard are pretty diverse, actually. A lot of times when you ask people this question on other bus lines or other rail lines, the biggest component or the biggest answer usually revolves around commuting to work. In this case, we saw some pretty good distribution of different types of trips. So recreation and leisure shopping were two big ones, particularly with all the shopping on Colorado Boulevard. That's not surprising. Additionally, service-based trips, so going to the doctor's office, for example, or going elsewhere, was a big component. Work was also a big component. And then we had a good amount of people using the bus for school as well. So this is good because I think it shows that there's a lot of room for growth on the corridor. We can really build on the trips and the destinations that exist today and make sure that this is a really successful project. When we asked folks what types of things they would like to see out of this project, out of an improved bus service on Colorado Boulevard, we heard pretty consistently that having the buses run on time and be reliable were really important issues. So people wanted to be able to rely on the bus being there when they needed it to be so that they could get to where they need to be on time. Additionally, pedestrian improvements and safety were huge components as well. So as I'm sure you're all well aware, there are parts of Colorado Boulevard that have pretty poor sidewalks and in some cases no sidewalks at all. And certainly if you're trying to get across the road or even walk along it, it just doesn't feel very safe. And certainly with some of the higher speed sections of the street, there's a safety issue for drivers as well. And so that's a thing that we are really focused on improving, in addition to connections to other bike infrastructure. So Denver's been installing lots of bike routes and bike infrastructure in the overall area. And so making sure that this project connects well to those routes is an important thing as well. Overall, I think, we've heard a lot of support for the project. I think the questions and the concerns come in the details, but I think everyone generally agrees that things need to change in some way on Colorado Boulevard. And so, I think that's a good thing. We have a lot to dig into and to analyze. And I think we will certainly have a lot of discussions about what the right solution is, but it'll be a good process. And so these are just some of the themes that I mentioned earlier. I think I did want to point out though two ones that we have heard quite a bit about. So public involvement ongoing. We've been taking a lot of different approaches to engaging the community. Certainly doing these types of open houses, meetings like this. We've been going to events in the community. So some of the district academies, the events that are scheduled. We've been actually doing some pop-up work where we'll just go to a recreation center, for example, and have a table and have a bunch of information and have conversations with folks as they come and go. And then there have been a lot of questions also about the cost and funding. And on that note, we don't really have a sense of how much this project will cost yet. We have an idea of the magnitude of it, but I would say that we don't have any numbers to share until we can really finalize the alignment and the design of the project. And so once we do that, we'll have a better sense of where we need to go for funding. Although we are anticipating asking the Federal Transit Administration for a significant portion of the funding, which is what we've done for Federal Boulevard. And I know there's some questions around that in regard to the change in the administration, the executive branch at the federal government. And, we're proceeding as planned. And when things change, if they change, then we will adjust accordingly. So the alternatives analysis that I mentioned, so it's really a multi-tiered process to develop the design at a conceptual level for the corridor. So where we start is with our vision and goals and some of the goals that I discussed earlier. And then we go through what we call a step-by-step screening process. And so we've completed one of these steps, the feasibility screening. And so this is where we've just taken all the potential options within those particular alignments of the BRT and thought about like, okay, well, what will work and what probably is not going to work. And so I can dig more into that here in a moment. But the idea is to arrive at what we would call a recommended alternative or a preferred alternative through this multi-tiered process where people have the opportunity to weigh in each step and make sure that we're on the right track. We're thinking about the right things at each of these steps. So each step builds in detail. And so this first step, which I'll cover here in a moment, is really just high level. What is there room to do and what is there not room to do? We've also broken up the corridor between 40th and Colorado Station and Southmore Station into 9 different segments. And this is really based on the fact that Colorado Boulevard in this long length is not contiguous. It's not the same in each part of the corridor. It changes in character, it changes in land use, traffic volumes change. And so as we think about developing a BRT, we don't think that it will be one design all the way through the corridor per se. It could change alignments. It could go from the center to the side or from bus lanes to mixed traffic. It could look very different in some places than others. I think the things that we'll look for continuity with are really the stations. So making sure that all those elements of the stations that I mentioned are in place, the platforms, ticket vending machines, distinctive canopies, real-time information, and making sure that at the signals, and this is very important, that we have transit signal priority at each of the signals, because that really does make a big difference in the progression of the bus through the corridor. Certainly, having dedicated space for the bus also makes a difference, but there are a lot of constraints that we'll need to consider when we take a look at that. And so that's why we take this segmented approach to make sure that we're getting the right answer for each different context of the corridor. So as I mentioned, we start with a feasibility screening. And so we really had 3 major criteria where we considered if each of the different configurations would work or not. So one was, will the configuration require full property acquisitions? So this means, the impacts of the project are such that, it could affect the building. It could take over 50% of the parking or business operations, or if it's a single family residential neighborhood, the impacts would be within 10 feet of a house, or would remove more than 20 feet of the driveway. So we really want to make sure that when we design this project, that we are certainly not impacting businesses unduly, making sure that we're not impacting quality of life where neighborhoods are fronting Colorado Boulevard. And so it's really important that we minimize these impacts as much as possible. We also looked at partial property acquisitions. So these are impacts where there would be, perhaps some acquisition required on the property, like, in a matter of feet, but it wouldn't rise to the level of that full property acquisition that I just mentioned. We really, again, would work to minimize these. So you'd be talking about maybe we need a few extra feet behind the sidewalk, something of that nature. So more minor impacts on this end. And then finally, major infrastructure impacts. So there are bridges along the corridor, certainly the bridge over Cherry Creek. We do not have the budget or, frankly, the time because of our mandate to complete this project before the end of the decade to be rebuilding major bridges in the corridor. Billboards are fairly hard to impact because there's a lot of regulatory issues that come along with those, and they are privately owned. Additionally, large culverts, structural walls, major utilities, things that just would really take a lot of time and effort to relocate or rebuild. We don't necessarily want the BRT project to get caught up in that and get the schedule delayed. We really do want to deliver the project as soon as we can. So a few concepts, and I'll go through these. This is the largest concept of the ones we looked at in the first screening phase. So this would be retaining all the lanes that are on Colorado Boulevard today, and then adding 2 additional lanes for the bus rapid transit. So that could either happen in the middle or the sides. So as you can see, this would require quite a bit of additional right-of-way. So that is concept A. Concept B would be taking one of the lanes and converting it from a through lane for everyone, for general purpose traffic, to a bus-only lane. And so in the center of the street, that would be a fully bus-only lane. On the sides of the street, that would be, like I said earlier, a semi-exclusive bus lane where it's primarily for the bus to go north and south. But then if you were driving and you dig into a driveway or take a right at an intersection, you could use the bus lane for that. So in this concept, we would have to do some minor realignment of curbs in some locations. Just because the width of the street varies. And so to get that consistency, we would have to do some localized curb work and roadway work. But otherwise, it would be repurposing some of the operations that exist today. And then concept C is the same thing, only we would not do any of that curb work and localized road work. We would simply just change the roadway striping and then do any work related to the stations. So this has a smaller footprint than the last one, but also some considerations as we move forward. And then the last concept is the mixed flow condition. So this is the one where basically the roadway stays as it is, except that we build the bus rapid transit stations, as I mentioned, and then we do the signal work. And that would be the way in which the bus would achieve speed and reliability improvements, in addition to having more buses through increased frequencies. And so in our first screen, which we did with our project partners, our project leadership team from the City and County of Denver, RTD, Dr. Cog, and the City of Glendale, we basically went through this process and looked at the impacts and determined that adding 2 new lanes to Colorado Boulevard, in addition to all the lanes that are out there today, is just probably not feasible from a budget perspective or probably from a community perspective as well, because there would be major impacts to private property in doing that. So basically concept A from this point, we will not consider anymore. And the next step of the process, where we get more detailed and think about different types of impacts, we will advance concept B, C, and D. And so the next screening process or the next step would be thinking about the things that are listed here. So connectivity to other bus routes, connectivity to trails and bikeways, certainly corridor safety. So I think we'll be taking a pretty significant look at the crashes, which we've already started to do through that corridor plan I mentioned. We'll really dig into that in some more detail. And then think about what are these three options that I mentioned, concepts B, C, and D. What do those do for improving the travel time if you're on the bus? And what do they do to the travel time if you're driving? So looking at those two things side by side are really important, along with the traffic operations, making sure that, you know, we all know congestion is really bad. Colorado Boulevard, we don't want to make it worse. So that's a thing to consider as well. And then cost and equity concerns. So making sure that the solutions will meet the needs of the people who rely on the bus the most, and that we can deliver this project with a good cost benefit ratio. That's the next step of the process, and we will certainly be sharing that in the next month or two. So our next stakeholder meeting, sorry, there's a word missing here, is in spring of 2025. So this is where we will dig more into detail on things I just mentioned. However, I'm happy to come to this group and provide an update at any point. So if you want to do that before the stakeholder meeting or after, happy to do so. But we will have more information in the next 2 to 3 months. And that is basically the information I have for you tonight. I'm happy to take any questions or discuss any of the things that I covered.
Thank you, Ryan. There were a few questions in the chat that were brought up, and I will present those. So Bill asked, since this is a federally funded project, when will you complete the required environmental impact study?
Our goal is to have that done about mid-2026. So we're just starting that. We'll have a lot more information and detail on it in the coming year, and opportunities to review some of that information as well.
Meredith asked, can side running be turned into mixed lane or vice versa for lane location? And will service run to Southmore Station on all runs? Presently, Colorado Station to Southmore is serviced on only a half. Anthony Moreno responded, as of September, RTD updated the RTD 40 service to run every 15 minutes to Southmore Station. Weekdays, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. But yes, it will maintain the most current level of service on or improve it. And I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I would say, did my screen stop sharing here? Sorry about that. I'll pull that back up if anyone wants to refer to any of the slides. Yeah, so Anthony's response is right. The BRT would run at a minimum of 15 minutes, so 4 times an hour. I think, you know, we are looking at a higher frequency of buses. We have not yet determined what that will be. That's kind of part of this process we're going through now, but certainly just, you know, with the Federal Boulevard BRT, we have planned for a higher frequency in the busiest part of the corridor. And so it could look something like that, but we'll have more to come.
And that makes sense because, you know, you broke this down into the segments, and when you look at those segments, they can be very different from one another in terms of the character of the properties on either side. Brooks asked, there have been 2 pedestrian deaths on this corridor in the last month. Any comments?
I don't know the particulars of those crashes, but I can certainly follow up. But I mean, I guess my comment would be that, you know, one of one of the primary goals of this project is to ensure that people don't die when they're crossing the street or getting on the bus or riding a bike. I mean, that's not something that we want to happen on our roadways.
Chris Nicholson, who is here now, said, what infrastructure investment will be made to address community safety concerns?
It's a good question. So I would say at the stations themselves, we are very focused on building safety into the design. So certainly having improved lighting, emergency call boxes, ensuring that the sight lines of the station area are improved so that, you know, if you're waiting for the bus and someone's approaching the station, you can see them coming. I think that's something that we've heard consistently through our engagement, is making sure that if you're standing in a station at night, you don't feel like someone can take you by surprise. And then, you know, some of the things that we've looked at on federal, which I think will be things we look at here, are improved roadway lighting. So ensuring that particularly at crossings, there's better lighting so that drivers can see when people are crossing the street, especially when it's dark out. And then we are looking at a number of safety countermeasures for actual travel safety. So ensuring that pedestrians have more than adequate time to cross the street, looking at potential pedestrian islands in the middle of the street where crossings are long, looking at turning radii, thinking about speed. So speed is a big issue on a lot of these within state highways, and ensuring that we are managing operating speeds, because speed and serious injury crashes have a direct correlation. So I think all those things are things that we'll be working into the design.
Stuart asked, what consideration has been given to a mobility hub in Burns Park?
We haven't gone that far, but I think it's a good thing to look at. So that'll certainly be something that we can talk more about, Stuart.
I know that one of the issues that has been discussed from time to time, and I think it really is correcting maybe some misinformation, is that there is an automatic assumption that if you put BRT along Colorado Boulevard, that the adjoining properties will all be upzoned to a 12-story zone district, which my understanding is that that's absolutely not true, that though there would still have to be a rezoning application, proof made as to what that route really is. Is it, you know, what level of transportation quality is it, et cetera. But I'd like to have you address that, even though I think we're all sensitive to the fact that with everything that we're hearing in the legislation is that if there is a true BRT corridor that is built and functioning, that then parking reductions and higher density would be considered. But it doesn't happen automatically. I'd like you just to talk to that point.
Sure, yeah. I mean, so CDOT has no control over zoning. All we control is what happens on the transportation network. I will say that, you know, there certainly is a lot of discussion in regard to tying better housing options or more housing options, however you want to look at it, to transit. And I think that is certainly something that could, you know, be a long-term result of these projects. But, you know, that'll happen at the local level. So that'll be something that the city and county of Denver primarily and the city of Glendale will look at. And I'm sure that they will have a very thorough process in analyzing, you know, what changes, if any, should be made to long-term zoning. Or, you know, I would say generally speaking, if, you know, you look at some of the long-range plans that they have, I think BRT is consistent with what they've already done work around. And I think the other thing to point out probably is that Colorado Boulevard already has a lot of high density on it. So I think, you know, our goal is to serve the people who are in the corridor and then build on that.
And another sort of related point, through that segment that goes through between Hilltop and Cherry Creek North and Cherry Creek East to a certain extent as well, that being a state highway and a boulevard, there were larger setbacks. But my understanding is that people have been allowed to build within those setbacks. And we've called this out for some time to understand if people have been allowed to build in those setbacks, that will impede the ability, of course, to take more of that property into consideration. So if that is the result, which is you're going to widen the lanes, how does that impact what has been allowed to be constructed within those setbacks? Do you have any input into that?
I don't have any input into that. I don't think that, aside from access, CDOT really doesn't either. I would say, our goal is to use as much of the existing infrastructure as we can, aside from building the new stations. And certainly, depending on what the BRT looks like, that, could have impacts in those areas, or if it's in the middle of the street, maybe it doesn't. So I think, those are things that we'll consider as we're developing the design for this project. But yeah, I don't, other than, potential station locations, I don't see any direct impacts to those areas from this project.
Brooks asks, really relevant to what we're doing here in this part of the city, any possibility that station design can have a theme related to the adjacent community, for example, at the Cherry Creek gateways? So could station design include artwork or sculpture?
Yes, there is opportunity for that. So I think the approach we've taken with the CDOT-led BRT projects is a little bit different than Colfax, in that I think, generally speaking, the station footprint will be smaller than the Colfax stations, and the architecture of the station, generally speaking, will be consistent. But within that architecture, I think our goal is to provide opportunities for customization. So have, areas where you could put sculptures or two different colors, or, have different panels. So things of that nature. And we're certainly not very far in that process on Colorado yet, but that would be our goal, I think.
When the BRT for Colorado goes in, we would hope that at that point the Colfax BRT is well established and will take people all the way to the Anschutz Medical Center. So would there be a transitioning point, Colorado, where people can easily change to get up to Colorado and then eastbound on Colfax? And what will that look like?
Well, I don't know what it'll look like yet. Again, because we haven't really figured out where the bus will be on the street yet. But I will say that that's probably going to be one of the, if not the most focal of all the stations that we develop, because of its connection to the Colfax BRT. So certainly I anticipate that that'll be a very robust station and transfer point.
So I don't see any other questions in the chat. Does anybody have a question they'd like to ask?
I'd just like to go over the financials again. What commitments do we have thus far from the city or through the Dr. Cog plans, or through RTD? Is all of this based on a federal grant through FTA?
So we currently have about 50 million allocated to this project officially through the 10-year plan. So those are CDOT funds, but they're actually in the DRCOG TIP Transportation Improvement Plan, the program. So that money is there. We anticipate adding more state dollars, probably through one source that we're pursuing for federal, which I anticipate we'll also pursue for Colorado Boulevard, is the non-attainment area and pollution mitigation enterprise funds. So it's a relatively new source of funding that comes from car rental fees. We will pursue the Federal Transit Administration Small Starts Capital Investment Grant. So we anticipate doing that or beginning that process next year with FTA Region 8, which is headquartered in Denver. And then in regard to local funding, we're still in conversations with Denver and Glendale about what that looks like, but I anticipate that there will be, they'll be supporting us in some way as well. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I think, we do have a lot of sources that we can bring to bear for this project. So, I think we want to utilize the high level sources as much as we can before we start asking our local partners, because their budgets generally are more constrained.
Would I be way out of line to suggest that the cost will likely be 150 million to 200?
I don't think that that's unrealistic.
Okay.
I mean, I think it depends on, what it ends up looking like, but, I mean, generally speaking, if you look at Colfax and Federal Boulevard, and Federal Boulevard's maybe twice as long as this project,
Mm-hmm.
The ballpark is about right.
Okay, thank you.
Ryan, one question I have is, right now we have, and you admitted this, everyone knows that our bus stops through this particular area are pretty bad. So at first in Colorado, it's pretty dangerous right there. And there are really no sidewalks, and it's just, to ask people to go wait for the bus with, in the mud and very close to sort of difficult transit corridors, pedestrian transit corridors. So I'm hoping that we will still continue to maintain and maybe upgrade some of those stops, because this is kind of a long-term project and we have such immediate needs. So how do the immediate needs get addressed while this planning is in process?
So we did identify some short-term projects through the corridor plan we finished up. And we have a small pot of funding to address those. So we're figuring out right now which ones it makes sense to advance, and then which ones are probably better to deliver as part of a larger project. But those are very focused on specific locations and improving safety at those locations. In regard to maintenance, I think that's a hard topic. It's probably going to need there'll be changes to the way the corridor is maintained today with the BRT. I'm not clear what that looks like yet. It'll be a long, not a long process, but it'll be a process. So in the meantime, I think if we can identify particular locations that need more immediate attention, then I can certainly work with my partners at RTD in the city of Denver and the city of Glendale to see if we can address those in some other way. So if you want to highlight some of those locations for me and send them my way, I can help with that.
Oh, I'm certain that this group could get some pictures and identify some of those areas that are really in need of some TLC. So we'll do that. Brooks has added another question in the chat. Is Glendale engaged in the discussion on where their station will be? Is there new entertainment development directly connected to a proposed station at the creek?
So they have been involved in the discussion about where stations will be located. I don't know if I've made that connection. Um, can you hear me?
Mhm.
Sorry,
Yeah.
my screen froze, so I didn't know if my computer froze. But I'll follow up with Glendale on that.
Okay. And I have to say, we really appreciate your coming tonight, Ryan, and agreeing to come back. I think this issue has a lot of people concerned, and we understand that first we're going to go to Colorado Boulevard, but then we're going to see Alameda, we're going to see the Spear Leedsdale corridor. And maybe you could just, end with a discussion about timing of how those other projects that we've heard about would relate in terms of priority timing.
Yeah, so right now the list of projects that we're working off of are really in the Denver, Dr. Cog Metro Vision 2050. And so they have the different BRT projects broken out by decade. So Colorado and Federal are in 2020 to 2030. Alameda, Spear Leedsdale, Parker are in 2030 to 2040. So I anticipate that those projects will be a longer development period than this one. This one we've been directed to deliver before calendar year 2030. So we are working hard to make that happen. And like I said earlier, it seems like a long time, but from a development perspective for a project this large, it really does take a good amount of time to develop these projects. But I know Alameda has recently completed, or Dr. Cog led and completed a corridor study on Alameda, and I think there's probably, this alternatives analysis process that I mentioned earlier. I think that would be the next step on Alameda, and certainly probably Spear Leedsdale Parker as well. So I think there's going to be some time before those two really kick off and get rolling.
One of the things that it occurs to me that there are some projects, and one that it's close to the steering committee, that the renovation and redevelopment of the Belcaro shopping center there, and what kind of density. But it seems to me that as developers look at this corridor for future development, the time is now to really bring them to the table. And I think Stuart knows this because they're all going to be involved in transit management planning, which is very, very important. But when we have an opportunity with developers to talk about what those stations will look like, and just so you know, Cherry Creek East and Cherry Creek North went together and did fairly robust developer agreements on the properties at First Avenue and Colorado Boulevard, and also Bayard and Colorado Boulevard. So, and the discussion, in fact, the depiction, and it's a recorded document, I'm happy to get it over to you, shows what the enhanced bus stop would look like. We're hoping that we don't have to wait that long before those properties redevelop. We know that they're on the market. We know one in the Cherry Creek East side is, I believe, under contract and sold at this point. Maybe Bill or Tracy have an update on that. But we really want to be able to encourage that the neighborhoods that have been involved in kind of helping guide development in this way through the zoning committees and through thoughtful planning can incorporate the transit management plans that Stuart works on, along with what you are doing, so that if we could get it right, if we're going to end up with shared lanes in those segments where it makes sense, where you have a lot of turning, there's no reason not to take the developer work that they're doing and do it now, so it doesn't get developed and then has to be redeveloped and torn up. So I mean, it seems common sense and cost saving to do that now. I'll let you comment to that, and then Stuart. Ryan, do you want to comment first, or do you want Stuart to weigh in on that point?
We didn't hear you, I don't think, Lou.
I didn't hear the last part of that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. What I was saying is that since we've done some of this planning, and since transit management plans are now required and the development is continuing, the goal was to try to make sure that we don't have this development in a way that sort of matches the expectation of the neighborhoods and the transit management, only to have this plan come and change all of what's being put in. So I would hope that this process would result in your team, Ryan, being at the table now when those developments are coming up. And I use the Belcaro redevelopment as an example of an opportunity to do just that.
Yeah, and I'm sure Stuart has some good things to add to this, but certainly we want to build on work that's already been done. And if, the community has been really involved, that makes it even more important. So, yeah, I mean, I think we're willing to take those plans into, into our process. And then also, I would say, we are working very closely with Denver and with community planning and development. So, we have that coordination there as well. But Stuart.
Yeah, I just wanted to add two items that I think are critical as we move forward. We're facing a lot of properties that could potentially become upzoned. And, it's a leap of faith for a neighborhood group to say, okay, build it a little higher so that we know there's going to be bus service out there. And then there's this tremendous fear that we end up with buildings that cause such gridlock that we can't get around, and government fails to put the funding together to really move this forward in a good way. That's one issue, because we're going to have to face a lot of projects. Belcaro is one, but there's many others as well. The second is the value of this BRT to us in Cherry Creek is the connection from Colorado into Cherry Creek. And right now, our east-west bus services are so pathetic that, I mean, the 3 is ridiculous. It just doesn't show up. And, we can't rely on the 3, the 46, the 1. None of them are going to quite do that for us. The 83 could. But again, what's going to happen in the interim if it's going to be 10 years before we see the Spear-Leetsdale BRT, and Colorado Boulevard is not useful for us for 10 years. And we have nearly 15,000 employees in the hospitality service and retail industry that are inclined to use transit. And I just end this by saying, when we did a survey of workers in Cherry Creek, we found that 42% of drive-alone commuters would consider an alternative if it was convenient and reliable. So we are a great market for transit. We just need to get the quality and reliable transit that we need.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think there's a lot in that, right? But I would say one thing that I can offer is for Federal Boulevard, we have been doing a first and last mile study to look at trying to improve some connections, whether they be by bike, walking, micromobility, microtransit, to the Federal Boulevard BRT line. And so I think our hope is to do a similar thing on Colorado Boulevard. I haven't worked out all the details yet, but I think that is certainly something that can potentially address, at least identifying where those needs are.
Well, again, thank you for being here tonight, Ryan, and we hope that you'll join us in the future if everyone wants to start taking pictures of some of those bus stops and sending them to me, I'll gather them together and we'll get them over to Ryan. If there aren't any other questions, we'll leave it at that for now. Ryan, if you would not mind sharing your slide deck with me, I will send it to the committee so everyone can, I know I, for one, have a hard time seeing some of the detail because it's pretty small print, but if we could send those around, then people can really blow it up and take a look at some of the detail. And Annette, I don't know if you want to weigh in on it, on your perception of how the first that stakeholder meeting went. Oh, you're muted. Annette, you're muted.
I don't have a whole lot to add because so much of the discussion today was what was presented at the meeting. I thought it was really comprehensive. I think one of the concerns of several people that I've talked to after the meeting is by putting this on rapid bus transit on Colorado Boulevard, are people just going to go to other streets to travel like University? And if they do, how much cut through the neighborhood is going to occur? And I don't think this is anything that anyone can answer. And the other thing is looking at putting bike lanes on in the same project as taking away 2 lanes and adding the rapid bus transit. And where is that bike access going to go? And I think that's also a concern.
Thanks, Annette. And that's a really good point, because I know that came up at one of the earlier stakeholder meetings that I attended. And it's pretty clear to those of us who live in this area and live through the development of the bike lane on Garfield. We've got a dedicated bike lane that goes through, which is just 2 blocks off. So the thought of adding that again right adjacent, as opposed to getting people safer in the Garfield bike lane, but that certainly is not true when you get into the other segments. So I think that's a good point to bring up, because with a lot of the bike infrastructure going in and with a lot of e-bikes being utilized, I think that's a real concern. So Ryan, thank you very much. You are welcome to stay on the bike and scooter issue. I don't know if Nick wants to talk about it, or maybe Stuart could update us. I do know that the ability to have speed reduction mandated on the bike. So if you're renting a scooter or a bike and you get into certain areas, they can mandate that the speed goes lower. And that has been done in the Cherry Creek area, but I don't know the exact areas where it's effective. Stuart or Nick, do you want to weigh in on that?
I can share on the speed limit. They can go up to 15 miles per hour, except when they cross University on the Cherry Creek Trail. It slows down to 8 miles, and it does not go back up to 15 until they get over towards Colorado. The reason being is that that's a high pedestrian zone through that area. Several of you brought that up during Denver Moves Cherry Creek. So, Richard Barrett and I had an opportunity to meet with the providers and talk about what our expectations are. And I know, Nick, you could probably speak to the corrals and other types of things that Richard was pursuing.
Yeah, we were concerned about the ability of, apparently the area can be geofenced. That's my understanding. And I've only had a brief conversation with Richard about this, but we would like to see the scooters placed in one location when they're not being ridden. And apparently there are penalties that a rider can incur if they're not returned properly. The other thing is we just want to keep them off the sidewalks. And
And apparently that's possible as well. So actually, from what Richard tells me, he was highly encouraged by the meeting.
So I think for everybody, we'll get a little more detail on that, but I think it's really good news that we can actually work with these providers so that you can't misbehave on your scooter and or your rented e-bike. You can on your own probably, but not on those. So thank you for continuing to pursue that, Nick. I'm going to take Meredith first. And Meredith, did you put your hand down? Do you still have your hand up?
No, I was wondering about if it's on a private e-bike.
Okay. Yeah. No, they
I
can't control everybody's.
Right. And Stuart, are you saying 15 miles an hour for the lift bikes, but private bikes can go faster than that, right?
Yes, but really our problem in the city has been scooters. And probably my son, who uses a scooter all the time at full speed. But you know, the slowing them down by geofencing the area is something that we can do. As far as the private bike owners, they tend to behave better.
They paid for their own bikes.
That, but
yeah, but there is an option of putting in signage, and we talked about that as well. You know, to have line pay for signage as well along that area to say, you know, slow down or dismount.
Chris, you have your hand up. First of all, we're going to welcome you again. You weren't here when Stuart said all the great things about you that he did. So everyone meet Chris, who is our new representative for our RTD district. So Chris, you have a question, but then also maybe you can we only have 7 minutes left of our meeting, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about you and your goals.
Sure. So I guess I'll probably start with the first thing, and then I'll ask my question so that they can respond to that. So hi, I'm Chris Nicholson. I am running. I'm still used to. I am going to be your new RTD director for District A, which includes basically all of central Denver, south of Colfax. Down to about Mississippi from I-25 out to Lowry. I live in the small part that's in upper downtown, right over by the Colorado National Bank, about halfway between Union Station and Civic Center. I'm a full-time transit rider. I have been out to Cherry Creek many, many, many times. It's actually one of my favorite neighborhoods. We'll take the bus to get there. And on the campaign trail, the most common question that I had from voters was about the Colfax BRT and making sure that we are going to do it in a way that provides value to the people who live there. You know, obviously RTD is concerned with the entire network, and one of my goals is to increase ridership, but the question is, where do you get that from? I believe the way we go about doing that is getting people who have cars, who are comfortable driving their cars, to see RTD as an occasional option for something where it is valuable to them, whether that's getting to a restaurant or a bar or getting to the airport. You know, we have to provide value to the 90+% of people who live in and pay for RTD, but generally don't use it. So that's what I'm going to be asking about. I want people to like having BRT in their neighborhood. And I know that's a high bar for a lot of people. And so we have to deliver service that is safe, reliable, and user-friendly. And so those are some of the things that I'm really thinking about in the first year. My question with regard to, well, not really a question so much, I raised my hand. I've worked very closely for the last 2 years with Chris Hines, who's the city council member for downtown Denver, because where I live, I walk 2 feet out my door and people in my building have been hit by scooters walking out their front door. So this is a very serious concern in downtown and in the rest of the city as well. He is working on legislation that will start. I think we're looking at first quarter of next year to significantly address a wide array of these concerns around scooter parking, not leaving them hanging out on the sidewalks, but having to deposit them in specific locations, riding on the sidewalk and having actual enforcement and penalties for doing so. So I would strongly encourage, if you haven't already been having conversations with Amanda Sawyer's office, with Chris's office, he wants the best ideas possible in that legislation, because people are tired, they're fed up, and we need to do this right. Otherwise, it interferes with all of the other mobility options that we have. So yeah, please consider me a resource on that, and on everything related to RTD. I'll put my number and my email address in the chat. And if you ever have any issues with RTD, please do call. And I look forward to talking with all of you over the next 4 years.
And you're welcome at the steering committee every month, where we usually meet the fourth Wednesday from 5 to 6:30. We've had a couple change ups just because of the holidays. And I'll close out this meeting. We only have 3 minutes left. And so I asked everyone to think, do they want to try to be in person in December? Is that just too loaded? A time for everyone. It will be on December 18th. What does the group think? Show of hands for Zoom. Show of hands for in person. Okay, it looks about like even. So why don't I talk to Nick and Richard and see, I don't know, Nick, if December is just too crazy, but it's a lovely time to walk down into the neighborhood. And so what are you thinking?
We're certainly happy to host. No problem with the availability of the room.
All right. Why don't we go ahead, and since he's not here, I'll just volunteer Richard to do what he has done before, which is for those who can't make it in person, we will have the Team/Zoom option to participate, but we'll plan on doing it in person on the 18th. Chris, you're welcome to come and meet everybody in person then. I think I'm going to meet you at the Transportation Solution meeting, but we really do appreciate close ties, because this area is really dependent for the health of our businesses on good transit and taking care of everyone. So thank you all very much. It is 6:28. We will call the meeting to a close. Thank you all for being here. If you've got some ideas, send them to me. Otherwise, we will talk a lot of DAB and see you all on the 18th of December. Thank you again. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Lou. Thank you, Lou.